The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 25. The Grid. When I turned on the bizarre machine in Kevin Flynn's laboratory, my eyes were flooded with colored light, and I had the sense of falling from an impossible height, but without the rush of wind that such a fall would entail. An odd prickling sensation covered my body, almost like a cat walking over my skin with claws extended. I began to cast Fly in a panic, hoping that I could complete it before crashing into the ground. Luckily, I landed unharmed before the spell was complete, and found myself somewhere. The Grid, as I would learn to call it, defies description, and I had my first taste of its strangeness when I saw myself upon landing. I was clad in some bizarre leather armor, outlined with blue lights. On my back, like some sort of knapsack, was a glowing disc. A city surrounded me, unnaturally lit with more blue light under a scorched and darkened sky. In fact, both the Grid and the circumstances of my arrival were so strange that I wondered at first whether it was a domain at all. Perhaps I had triggered some portal to one of those other planes of which Outlanders speak, or activated a potent conjuration spell such as Reality Break or Maze. The longer I spent in the Grid, however, the clearer it became that it was a dread realm in the mold of the others I had visited, and that its mad ruler hungered to make our realms as alien and lifeless as his own. The Lord. In some domains, it has taken me a certain amount of time to determine the identity of the Lord at its heart. In the Grid, I was immediately greeted by posters of a man in leather armor similar to my own, although with orange lights rather than blue, emblazoned with the words, Clue, our liberator. Subtlety, it seems, is not Clue's strong suit. After dodging several of Clue's prison transports and surveillance vehicles, none of which seemed to be prepared in any way for magical means of avoidance, I was able to find my way to a glossy, decadent establishment called the End of Line Club, where patrons were willing to divulge information in exchange for unpleasantly metallic-tasting beverages. From what I could gather, every being in the Grid, including Clue, was a program, a construct of Flynn's creation. Clue had been a sort of administrator or regent, ruling when Flynn was away in the human world. The accounts I heard of Clue's rebellion and seizure of power were invariably fawning. The tale of a great liberator who had freed his people from the tyranny of their mad creator and led them into a glorious new age. I noted that those with blue lights related this with far less fervor than those with orange or red, and that they often glanced over their shoulders before loudly, flatly declaiming on Clue's benevolence. Reading between the lines, it seems that Flynn was using the pocket reality of the Grid to model a perfect society. Clue served as a sort of steward, running the Grid when his creator was away. However, Clue's idea of perfection was more rigid than a human's. This issue was exacerbated by the fact that time in the Grid passes much faster than time outside of it. From Clue's perspective, he would spend hundreds of years remaking the Grid in his own despotic image, only for Flynn to undo his hard work whenever he returned. In fury and frustration, Clue overthrew Flynn and took over. Some say he killed Flynn, while others say he defeated him so thoroughly that the man can do nothing but hide and lick his wounds. Whatever happened, Flynn's absence in our world suggests that he never left the Grid. The land. The Grid is an entirely artificial land, and I felt this wearing on me the longer I stayed there. While there was some simulation of weather, the omnipresent clouds occasionally released lukewarm rain. There was no sun, no trees, nothing but an endless city of stone and glass. I could easily imagine an elf or druid going mad within its sterile boundaries. The center of both law and entertainment in the Grid is its arena. Had one of those prison transports discovered me without the appropriate papers, I would have been slated for either rectification, which, as near as I could tell, would have involved some kind of domination spell that would transform me into Clue's puppet, with red light as its signifier, or the games, a series of blood sports. Sometimes, the contestants in the games are adept fighters and athletes who give the audience a thrilling display of skill. Often, they are hapless victims, and the game's dubious pleasure lies in betting on how quickly they will be torn apart. Beyond the city limits is a dangerous waste called the Outlands, fraught with deadly storms and roaming monsters. Those who wish to hide from Clue may seek shelter in the Outlands, but because this includes bandits and murderers as well as rebels and refugees, this is an even more dangerous proposition than it would be otherwise. High-speed trains cross through the Outlands and connect several cities within the grid, although all of them suffer under Clue's rule. I discovered one especially bizarre aspect of the grid when I told someone that I came from beyond it. I suspected that in a world populated entirely by constructs, a being of flesh and blood would be a curiosity. I did not anticipate how thoroughly inadequate the word curiosity was. When I confessed my origin to a blue-armored woman who I suspected of being a freedom fighter, she fell to her knees, sobbing and saying again and again that she had always known the users would come to save her. The only human these constructs had ever known was Flynn, their creator. To them, this meant that all of us must be gods. Dread possibilities. Because I lacked the exhaustive documentation that Clue's government demanded, my plan had been to lurk on the margins until I could either find my way to forged papers or study someone well enough to mimic their mannerisms while using Mask of Many Faces. Unfortunately, I was not able to put that plan into action. I will never know how Castor, the proprietor of the End of Line Club, discovered that I was a user. I'm certain the woman I confided in would never have betrayed me knowingly, but perhaps she thought Castor was trustworthy, or perhaps Castor discovered me on his own by observing some tell that I did not realize I was displaying. Of course, there is the strong likelihood that she was captured and rectified, but I prefer not to consider that possibility. At any rate, Castor called me to a back room, saying that he had obtained forged papers for me. A plausible story, as I knew he had supplied them to others. When I followed him, however, I was greeted by a horde of red-suited soldiers, with Clue himself at their lead. Looking like a cat in a bowl of cream, Clue informed me that he had been waiting to get access to the disc of another user, as it would give him powers even greater than the ones he already possessed. To illustrate his terrible might, he cast Produce Flame. I couldn't help it. He bore such a self-satisfied expression at casting a cantrip that I began to laugh. Immediately, his face went cold, and he backhanded me, snarling that I would suffer the fate of all false gods. At that moment, the door burst open, and other constructs flooded in, these wearing blue armors and shouting that they would give their lives for the users if need be. I tried to stay and help, but one of them grabbed me and ushered me out, saying I was too precious to risk. Parting thoughts. The constructs conducted me to a portal and told me that I could use my disc to escape. Had Clue gotten hold of it, they explained, he might have been able to escape himself. His dearest ambition is to send his armies out of the grid and bring his perfection to the wider world. I cannot describe the relief I felt upon returning to Flynn's lab, seeing sunlight filtering through the windows. Holding a tile with a painted star as a mist talisman, I prepared to set out on the next phase of my journey with a light heart. Felt this? No, I haven't. I swear on my response that I will throw caution to every warning sign. Watch out, world, here I are. Apologies. I appear to have triggered a confusion spell that Flynn laid to discourage trespassers. I will continue my journey now that it is worn off. Regards, D.
My servant witnessed the misery of a people surrounded by arcane energy in its purest form, but unable to see or sense it for themselves when she visited King Haggard's land. Now she has experienced a world truly devoid of magic. No doubt this void was advantageous for one whose power comes from elsewhere, for even the most novice of practitioners can fool those unaccustomed to such powers. Flynn is not the first in these lands to have their own creation turn against them when attempting to perfect life. Yet regardless of what some scientifically inclined and highly biased doctors may have you believe, the best constructs are made through magical means. To be able to create such a world and populace, I suggest Flynn was a master of conjuration. A building of stone and glass may be fabricated. A sky may hold a false storm. But the source of magic cannot be replicated. Magic is the very essence of creation. It weaves around all sources of life and death. It is this energy we pull upon and shape into our desires with the power of our will. With it, we hold the power of creation and destruction at our fingertips. Yet even the most talented wizards will find it impossible to replicate the source of this power. Given his rather feeble attempts at impressing upon my servant with his display of power, I suspect Clue has access to a small source of the arcane through those the constructs refer to as users. Perhaps even has some form of Flynn captured within the grid and is utilizing him as a magical conduit. A weak one, yes, but the magic must be coming from somewhere.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at darklordaslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.